let me ask you, first of all, what's the goal as you go into the hearing the next couple of days?
So the goal is to bring to light the details of Mr. Williams' significant drug use, drug withdrawal at the time of his arrest and interrogation by police, as well as the treatment that he received both at the time of his arrest and the escort out of the woods, to show the judge that given the effects of his drug withdrawal, being exhausted from drug use and not sleeping, he hadn't eaten in 4 days, he was extremely tired. All of those factors are factors that lead someone to, not to mention the physical and verbal threats and assaults upon him, all made him vulnerable to giving a confession that wasn't knowing and voluntary.
Let's talk about a couple of those details. How was he mistreated in your eyes?
Well, you'll hear testimony that officers admit to striking him despite him going straight to the ground at least once with once while both handcuffs were on. Our client will tell you or will likely testify that he offered zero resistance. There is conflicting reports among the police officers as to what happened, but there is no dispute that he was stricken. The officers describe it as a light strike, but we've all seen his face, and our client would say that he was not just stricken but kicked. He was stripped naked. It was April. It was about 20 to 25 minutes that they had him on the ground, naked, waiting for the tactical team to come and escort him out, and then another 15, 20 minutes. So he was basically naked in April for 40 minutes. When he got in the cruiser, he was freezing. He asked to take a nap several times during the interview. Officers refused that. They did give him food. The detectives treated him nicely, but our client would say, yeah, and you're right, they didn't beat me, but I thought they were going to protect me, and that's why I cooperated with them, because I didn't want to get back to the other officers who were assaulting and taunting me.
Do you believe the arresting officers acted the way they did because they believed he killed another officer?
I believe emotions were high. We're all human. I believe, these officers, it's a brotherhood, and that's understandable. I believe that there was a lot of energy in the 4 days looking for Mr. Williams, and officers were sleep deprived, people were tired. I don't think that gives them the right to use force and to verbally taunt him and make threats to him about his safety upon getting to the prison, and those types of things I think was unnecessary. But can I understand it to some extent? Sure.
Can you be more specific about the nature of John Williams' drug or addiction?
Sure. He had told officers that he was, in the weeks and months before the arrest, he was using cocaine, crack, heroin, basically anything he could get his hands on. He said he was smoking crack like he was inhaling air every 5 minutes or so. He would go 7 or 8 days without sleeping, and he would have moments when he believed he had been sleeping, and his girlfriend would tell him he had not been sleeping, so he was blacking out. There were periods of times when he either couldn't get drugs or I think it's common knowledge he had been arrested in Massachusetts. He spent a few days in jail. He had painful, both physical and mental withdrawal symptoms. So his drug use was, a panoply of drugs, and there was a lot, and he even used more after the incident while he was on the run, and then ran out.
Do you think in general it's hard for someone who's seen as a cop killer to get fair treatment?
I think the general public, and I think initially, and I also, I think there was there was very little sympathy for him, and frankly, he's not asking for sympathy. He's very clean. He's a much different person. They brought him to the meeting room at the jail with me the other day, and I thought they had brought the wrong kid. He's off drugs. He's obviously dried out over the last year. This isn't about trying to get sympathy for him. This is really about just trying to give him a fair shot at a trial in the state of Maine. And I think there's mixed reactions. I think there are some people who believe he should get a fair shot, and I think there are others who understandably are upset. And it's, fortunately this doesn't happen very often in our state, and it hasn't happened in 39 years. And there's a lot of emotion, and whether or not we're even going to be able to get a jury is going to be a tough situation. So.
That's a good point. How do you anticipate this plays out over the next couple of days?
So I have two experts who are going to testify. One of them is an addiction specialist who is going to testify about the effects that opiate and other drug withdrawals would have had on an individual in Mr. Williams' position at the time of his arrest and interrogation. He's also going to talk about the effects of hunger, sleep deprivation, isolation, and other factors that could influence his ability to knowingly waive his Miranda rights. I have a psychologist who is going to testify in general about factors that lead to coercions, that lead to confessions that aren't always voluntary. And then we anticipate the 7 members of the arrest team testifying tomorrow. And then we will have the detective who interviewed him on Friday, as well as play the 3.5 hour or so video of Mr. Williams' interrogation. And then it will be, we've just learned it will be continued until April 8th because we have a couple of other state forensic doctors and most likely Mr. Williams that will need to testify.
So it'll take some time before we know how the judge is going to.
Yes, it'll be at least after April, yes. But the trial's in June, so it'll be between April and June.
If this evidence, this confession, is suppressed, as you hope, how does that affect the case in general and just getting justice done?
Well, I mean, there's always in these cases, well, not always, but most times there's other evidence that supports the state's case. And, getting the suppression thrown out, getting the suppression granted and his statements thrown out, it's not going to be the end of the case, and it's not, is it a significant fact? Yes, but is it going to, does it significantly change or affect the outcome? Probably not to a significant degree, but certainly to some degree. Because I think some of what he said during this interview, he said after, like I said, these police officers were being nice to him, and he did not want to go back to the other officers. And he every time he tried to describe how the incident occurred, the detectives would tell him that they didn't believe him and that was not the way it occurred. And so, of course, Mr. Williams would then go in the direction that they told him. And so that kind of is what led to the initial media reports about, he had a vendetta against Deputy Cole, which is absolutely not true. That is absolutely not how this went down. And so I think if we get his statements to the police out, then we can make the decision at trial to have the jury hear directly from Mr. Williams what happened without being under the influence of those factors that we just talked about, the fear and the hunger and all of those things.
So he may testify at trial, but he's not expected to speak in these hearings in the next couple of days?
We believe he's going to testify on April 8th
okay.
at this suppression hearing, yes. But his testimony will have nothing to do with the event. It's going to be just related to his drug use and how he was feeling at the time he was interviewed by police and what the officers said. The officers admit to taunting him. They admit to some level of physical harm, but I think Mr. Williams has, depending on what the officers say, he may add more light to what they say because we feel like it may be minimized to some extent.